What's up, everybody? Here with Luke.
Yep.
You know, one of the winningest anglers of our time.
Coming from you, though, so.
It's a good compliment. Good compliment. Yeah. You know, I think always get a lot of questions, and there's always a lot of confusion. There's so much fishing line on the market.
It's
right?
insane.
I mean, there's monofilament, there's nylon, there's fluorocarbon, there's braid. Right? There's 8 carrier braid, there's 4 carrier braid. You know, what does all that mean?
Yeah, okay? Everything's got a different color, got a different weight.
Yeah, and it could be intimidating to people. You know, you walk into, Fisherman's warehouse and, they carry everything. They carry Sunline, which both you and I love. They carry Seagar. They carry a bunch of other brands as well.
Yep.
So I think we're going to take some time. We're going to start from finesse.
Start light, yep.
Yep, and then we're going to work our way up to the heavy stuff. And, obviously, I'm not the one to talk about a spinning rod. You want a lot of money doing it.
Yep.
Okay? So hit us up.
I'll head that off. So the thing with fishing line, you got so many different options, like you just said. So picking the right one it's incredibly important. So starting off with your spinning rod stuff, this is my go-to backing line, which is the Sunline SX1. So Sunline SX1, it's a very lightweight braid when you get it in their lower pounds. So on my spinning rods, I throw a 12-pound or a 16-pound, depending on where I'm fishing. So usually 12-pound if I'm in open water, if I'm fishing Shasta or, Folsom Lake, fishing up at the Columbia River maybe even, I'm throwing that 12-pound because you've got a thinner line diameter, it cuts through the water a little bit better, and you don't need quite as much strength when you're in open water. You can just, loosen your spool up. So I'm going with the 12-pound there. And then the 16-pound, if I'm, getting into grassier stuff and I want to be throwing a 10 or 12-pound leader on the end of that thing, then I bump it up to a 16-pound. The other really important thing about when you're picking a braid, especially for a spinning rod, which has helped me land a lot more fish over the last couple of years, which I already know. I know you know what I'm going to say, but it's a colored braid. You need to throw a colored braid and a bright colored braid.
Yeah, I throw like orange.
Yeah, so this one right here, this SX1, this is a chartreuse. It's neon bright, so when it's laying on the water and you get a bite, if you're throwing that weightless Senko like I like to do, and you get a bite, you'll watch your line move.
Yeah, you can. It's like a strike indicator.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like watching live scope with no live scope. So it's extremely helpful if you have a bright braid. That way it's not blending in with the water that you're throwing it in. Of course, if you are throwing a braided line, especially if you're in clear water and you're fishing for pressured fish, you want to throw some sort of leader material. So the leader line that I tend to go with is the Sunline Shooter. Now, of course, Sunline Shooter, it's premium. An expensive, it's premium stuff.
Yep.
Of course, that's what I trust when I'm fishing for money. But another great line, if you're looking for something cheaper, Sunline FC Sniper. This stuff is about half the price as the Shooter.
Tried and true.
But it's phenomenal. I mean, it gets the job done. Truthfully, there's not too much of a difference between these two. But, when you're fishing, for a lot of money, I'd rather go with the Shooter just because I know it might get me one more fish in the boat out of 1,000.
Yeah, so what I tell people, the difference between these two lines, if you're going to pick between these two lines, in any situation, is the Shooter is the premium brand, but the other thing that the Shooter that I like more is there is way less stretch in the Shooter than there is in the FC.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And the Shooter has the best abrasion resistance. So if you're fishing around like jagged rocks, trees, like, submerged trees in 20, 30, 40 feet of water, you really realize that the braid to this Shooter will make a big difference. When you get that first bite, that initial, I always say, I do talk bad about a spinning rod, but I do throw one because I have to.
I've seen it.
Yeah, no, I've seen you. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
Not pretty.
Yeah.
But I always think that when you get bit on a spinning rod and you're deep, that first 5 reel cranks, that first 10 or 15 feet, when all that happens, that really dictates whether you're going to land that fish or not.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
So having that strong braid, and again, there are times, when you prefer the Shooter over because you want that less stretch, you want more abrasion resistance. So that's really the two differences between these two lines.
Yeah. So,
do you ever not throw braid on a spinner?
Yes, I do. There's only There's a very low percentage of the time that that's happening, but the braid's been so popular over the last couple of years because of the sensitivity. You get no stretch, you can get a lot better hook set, especially when you're fishing, those really deep fish. But if I am throwing a bait like a float and fly, that is where I will go straight fluoro 100% of the time.
Okay.
And
why is that? Because I still throw it on the braid setup.
See, the reason for that is, A, it's one less leader for me to have to tie. Okay. That's the lazy side of me.
Okay.
But also, on top of that, it's just, you've got the ability...
All that stuff going through your guide? Or
you've got one less knot that you have to worry about when you're hooking a fish, so that it cuts out the user error of possibly losing a fish because you tied a bad knot. And then on top of that, it's one less thing going through your guides, which, when you're throwing a float and fly, castability is really key, because usually you're fishing for fish that are extremely pressured, and you're trying to get that one extra bite usually. And to get that thing away from you, and especially to be able to cast it very accurately, if something's ticking through your guides every cast, you're not going to be quite as accurate. So cutting that out of the way. And then on top of that, depending on how long you're throwing your float and fly leader, I have the ability to make it a 30-foot leader if I want to. And I know that sounds crazy,
right.
But I've done it before, and I've caught fish because of it. And
when you have the braid and you've tied on, 15 foot a leader, that's pretty much the limit.
Ability.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Your bobber won't go any further. Okay. So that's just a couple reasons. Aside from, the sensitivity, if you want sensitivity, always go with the braid. But if you do not care about the sensitivity, and you maybe want just a little bit better casting accuracy, that's where I just go with the straight fluorocarbon. So you can fit that in where you see fit in your own, fishing stuff.
I like the braid for two reasons for me. Mm-hmm. I like the braid because you can change the pound test of your leader very quickly.
That's a great point.
That's what I like about it. So, like I said, I'm with you. I usually throw... because I'm a shallow water type of fisherman, I usually go to I gravitate to the heavier braid.
Yeah.
Because the fish aren't going to see that anyways.
Yeah, they don't see it.
And unlike Luke, who uses the SX1, which is great for spinning rods, I use the Sunline PEX8. The reason I like that is because it's a tighter woven braid. That is if I'm correct, I think it's a 4-carrier braid. So it's a little bit louder through my guides, and I just like it when it's nice and quiet.
Okay.
But the other thing is, that's what I like about the braid on the back of the spinning rod is, if I want to go from 7 to 12 pound fluorocarbon, I can do it right now. Right? I just snip it off. I can tie 12 on, and if I wanted to, I could be drop shotting on the Delta. I can cut it off. And then I could go to Folsom when in the middle of the afternoon, and I can fish 6-pound tests if I need to.
Exactly.
So that's what I like about it.
Exactly. So that covers your spinning rods right there. Braid to leader or fluoro, depending on what you're going for. Check out both of those options. I mean, you've got a lot of play there, and you can set it up however you like.
Yeah, and Fisherman's carries, we prefer Sunline, but if you're into Seagar or whatever,
Suffix, whatever
the brands they are, they carry it.
We've got it. So moving into our next one, you turned me on to this one about a year ago, I think it was. It's the Sunline FC Crank. This stuff is just like insane for a crankbait line. I'm going to talk a little bit about my preference for it. I don't have as much experience with it as you, so I'll let you go into it. But I noticed when I started throwing this stuff that the abrasion resistance that you get with this line is far superior than any other line that I've ever thrown for a crankbait or a rip bait or anything like that. Especially when you're cranking, you want bottom contact. So having something having something that has a lot of abrasion resistance is extremely key. And the other thing is the stretch on this line. When you hook one of those fish, especially we were just up at Lake Almanor, and you hook a smallmouth on a rip bait.
Yeah, and it's going the other direction.
It's going the other direction, or it's going sky high, or it's trying to get back down into the rocks, and they're moving at, Mach speed. Having some stretch in your line to make sure that you don't pull those treble hooks out is so amazing. I mean, I don't think I lost a single fish that week after I had hooked it and got 1 or 2 reels on it, because I was able to just, let the fish play itself between the rod and the line and everything else. But of course, you've got a lot more experience throwing this stuff. I know you've been on the wave for a little while. So
I have, and I smile.
Let's hear the reasons.
I smile because I remember when I talked to you about it. Yeah, we talked about a year, maybe year and a half ago.
I think it was at Lake Trinity about a year and a half ago.
And we specifically talked about this Crank FC, you know, because here, this is the FC Sniper, okay?
Yep.
And in the Sunline line, this is probably the number one selling fluorocarbon in the entire line.
Yes, definitely.
What's great about the FC Sniper is it goes from the small test, you know, 5-6 pound test, and it goes all the way, and I believe it goes all the way to 25, if I'm correct. It might even go to 30. Okay, so this has been the gold standard, and it's a great line.
Yeah.
Okay, and they came out with Crank FC. And, you know, it's funny, they call it Crank FC because, and then, you know, when you call something Crank FC, people think you got to crank with it.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning crankbait with it. And you really don't. I mean, it's such a great line. This line goes from 8 pound test to 16. That's it. So it's 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So there's 5 line tests in this line. So whenever you need 18 or 20, right, which a lot of people, you know, throw 18 and 20, you would have to go to the FC Sniper.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm such a huge fan, again, I used to throw this probably 75% of the time when I was throwing fluorocarbon. Okay, and it's great line, but it definitely does not have the abrasion resistance that this line has. And when you get around even grass, you know, like where I really noticed it was around the Delta when I'm throwing a square bill, right, up on the rocks, right? Yep. A lot of jagged rocks, a lot of grass. There's just a lot of wood. There's a lot of stuff on the Delta for your line to rub up against and just, you know, that kind of stuff. And I realized that the Crank FC was just really superior, exactly what you said, in that abrasion resistance.
Yeah.
You know, and then what I love about it is the other thing is that it has very, very low memory.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You know, so you put like some 14 or 16 pound line early on the season on one of your reels. Say you don't use it very much, and you pick that rod and reel up like in March or April, a couple months later. You know, it doesn't have all that pigtail memory and all that stuff on there.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I really like about these two. You know, you can't go wrong with either one.
Yeah, the FC Sniper's phenomenal.
It is.
I mean, it's the best probably all-around line that we have sitting on the table, if you got to pick one, right?
It is. And what I do, this is what I do now, because I'm such a fan of Crank FC, that anytime, in any situation where I need 8 to 16, that's going to be my number one choice.
Wow.
Right? Now, when I get lower than that, tying leaders, like you talked about earlier, I'll still throw the FC. And then obviously if I throw 18, 20, or anything higher, I still throw the FC.
Yep.
You know, so that's how I pick between those two lines and what fluorocarbon I want to use or not want to use.
Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. So moving on, we got the Sunline Mono, which is this is their just supernatural line. This stuff's super cheap too, so
very inexpensive,
budget friendly. If this, you know, if that's one of your main points, this is a line for you. And aside from that, monofilament has some really cool features to it that you don't find in fluorocarbon.
Right.
So one of the reasons, of course, if you notice, I picked a heavier spool for this one. This one's 25 pound because a lot of the time when I'm throwing monofilament, I'm throwing it on baits like glide baits, an Alabama rig maybe, and then
certain swim baits,
you know, and of course topwaters because you've got floating, you know, aspects of monofilament.
Yeah, like a popper.
Yeah, popper, or, you know, of course, like I said, with the 25 pound, I'm throwing a wood punker on that thing, you know, because you've got a floating line. But the nice thing is you've also got a clear line. So the thing I like about the heavier monofilament is that when I'm throwing a big swim bait or something like that, I can usually just tie a snap swivel and I can change between a bunch of different stuff without having to cut down a leader all day. And I still get the really, you know, beneficial aspects of almost throwing braid with that floating aspect. But then you also get the stretch. A lot of swim baits nowadays,
more
especially
forgivingness, treble hooks.
Yep, you're going with a glide bait. You want some stretch in that thing. So that's when I'm picking up that spool. If I'm throwing some heavier baits, especially ones that have treble hooks, and I want a floating line, especially when you notice, I mean, if you're throwing a glide bait a lot, you don't want your glide bait, you know, necessarily to be sinking nose down in the water.
Right. Or if it's just neutral, you don't want that fluorocarbon to kind of pull that nose down.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So you don't want your line to affect the action of your bait, and the monofilament does a really good job of keeping pretty neutral with those big swim baits. That way they have the right action when you're fishing those things. And, if it means you land one more 5 or 9 or 10 pounder,
or the fish of your lifetime.
Yeah, or the fish of your lifetime. That's, just a good reason to throw it by itself.
Yeah, so
of course, I know you've got some reasons you throw that as well, right?
Yeah, so what I love about monofilament the most is it probably has the most superior knot strength of anything that's not braid, right? Like you tie a trilene knot or a Palomar knot on this, you're not concerned about the monofilament cinching down on itself like you are the braid, the fluorocarbon sometimes. So, and it is the most abrasion resistant line. Your monofilament, you can take it and literally saw it back and forth on a dock, right? And then pick your, reel your bait up and make a cast, right?
Yeah.
That's what's great about monofilament. You touched on all the other features. I actually used to crank around really gnarly stuff. I used to crank 16, 18, and 20 Supernatural. But ever since Crank FC came out, it kind of took over for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that stuff's phenomenal, so you can see why.
It is. So yeah, I still use mono also, just like you. It's probably a little more specific than it used to be. It used to be that's
Definitely,
all we had.
Definitely.
Okay.
Now, you've got the bread and butter for yourself
for me
now. Yeah.
For me.
So.
Braid. I throw a lot of braid. Especially on the Delta, and it's always fun. As the spring goes on. To throw that braid. And again, there's a lot of braid out there. Fisherman's Warehouse carries it. And I'm going to talk about the difference in braid. This is Sunline FX2. It's really the staple braid that Sunline's had out for a while. Comes in various colors. And, a lot of times in that 60-pound, that's what this is. That 60-pound braid is probably the best all around for casting. You're casting some type of topwater bait, walking bait, that kind of stuff. You can even frog on it and things like that. Moving up in that class would be the X-Plasma, the Asagi. So this comes in, this is a bigger spool, 60-pound also. So both of these are 60-pound. What I like about this better, it is a little bit more expensive, but what I like about this better is it's actually a little bit quieter. It's a little bit quieter and it's got more of a little slick coating than the FX does. Yeah, definitely. Right? So, but both lines are great. I like to use braid, again, anytime you're throwing topwater, if you're flipping, pitching, or punching, right? That's
the only option.
The only option.
Yeah.
And even topwater. I mean, like I've thrown topwater at Lake Shasta and Folsom and stuff. I throw it on braid. I don't throw it on monofilament.
Yep.
I just throw it on braid. I don't think the fish see it, and that's what's good about the FX. Like, this is a blue-green color. So, if the fish look up and see it, it's blue skies anyways.
Yep, exactly.
The other two things that are available in the U.S. that were originally from JDM that I really, I'm going to give you, like, kind of how I did with the Crank FC.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, I'm going to give you, so this is available at Sunline America. It's called Stutter. And then this one also, it's called Snakehead. All right. So I've been playing around with both of these braids the last 2 years. And what I love about the Stutter is that, like in this, it says 85, for instance, right? But it feels like it's 50.
That's nice.
It really is. So when you spool it on,
is very thin line diameter.
Very thin. And when you're making casts, like if you're throwing like perfect example, if you're throwing like not even a super spook. You're throwing a spook or maybe a little lighter topwater bait. This Stutter I really, really like. Knot strength's been really good. I really like that. And then the Snakehead is actually a little bit heavier line. So you can tell the difference. Like on this 85, if you held it and you hold this 66, the 66 is thicker.
Yeah.
Right? Even though the rating is lower. So for this, what I've been doing a lot is Texas rigging. Like I use this line at Clear Lake. So I was Texas rigging with it. But the big thing that I love throwing with this, I like frogging with it.
Oh, yeah.
That's the deal. So I just pulled some on today, some fresh stuff on today before I got here. So,
you'll lunch on some frogfish tomorrow, probably?
Hopefully so. Hopefully so. So, take us home.
Yeah. So, we've covered just about everything there is in the Sunline brand here, and we got to remember everything is very transferable over to, of course, all the other line brands that we carry here at Fisherman's Warehouse. So if you're looking for, a fluorocarbon or a Braid or a monofilament or, any other kind of line you could think of, we've got it here. And it's just important to know the reasons behind why you're picking up that line. You've got so many options when you walk down the line aisle, or if you go to in-store and get your line spooled by one of our in-store clerks, you'll notice, there's too many options for you to choose from. So hopefully we answered some of your guys' questions on, why we throw, what we throw, and when we throw it. So anyways, come on down to Fisherman's Warehouse or visit us online. We've got all your options here from Sunline and all the other major line brands. And they're guaranteed to help you put some more fish in the boat. So pick the right line, get out there, catch some fish.